Great. So we've got a really special session now. We've got Rebecca Roy, who's going to be interviewing Anna Pabissi. Some of her work is being used in the catwalk, if you managed to catch that today, and it's a really good example of cruelty-free, zero-waste fashion. So over to you guys.
Thank you so much for coming today, and I hope a lot of you will get to see the show today. My name is Rebecca Roy. I'm a fashion stylist. I met Anna indirectly many years ago when I bought one of her sweatshirts, which I loved, and then I contacted her, and Anna is a very modest, endearing, award-winning designer, and I'd really like her today to share her path with you as a designer and as an independent designer, how we sort of make those different steps and how we have those paths to become a designer. So let me introduce you to the lovely Anna. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, nice to meet you today.
So I wanted you to sort of tell us a little bit about, how, first of all, like Anna studied law. She's also a lawyer who turned fashion designer, which was always something you were interested in.
Well, fashion, yes. Law, not really. Yeah, definitely.
And from studying law, then you moved to London and you started to work in vintage.
Yes, I had a vintage shop in Marylebone in a place called Alfie's, and I had that for about 8 years. And I started by redesigning some vintage pieces to make them more current, and also rescuing them because they were in terrible condition. And from that, I started to have like one-off collections and finally my own brand.
So while you were working on the vintage and sort of remaking and changing the garments, what were the experiences and the reactions that you had to people and the people who came in who were buying things from you?
I mean, whatever I did was like selling straight away. And most of the time, actually, to the runners from the fashion houses. So at some point, I decided that if this is good enough for the fashion house to get inspired, whatever you call it, then I definitely can have my own brand.
So who was showing up and buying all the vintage?
Galliano, McQueen, Tom Ford was one of our best customers at some time. ASOS, loads of
so
them.
it's a really interesting and unusual pathway that sometimes we have in our entrance to fashion, and that was really sort of how you discovered that you had a style.
Yes, I guess. I mean, it's still, you could see that everything is heavily inspired by vintage. Whatever I do is still kind of, you could see that this is very much vintage style. Well, I hope it is.
But how did you, technically, how did you learn to do this?
I don't know, it was just so easy. I don't know. But also, to be fair, I had a very easy access to 1950s couture, 1940s couture. I've seen how I had original Dior dresses, so I could see how everything was done, from the stitching to where they placed the label, where the zip was placed. So I get obsessed with that. And even now, I can tell you exactly which piece comes from which era, just by the zip, or by the length of the zip, or by the stitch at the back. So it's became an obsession, I guess.
No, and I can really see that for you from the way that Anna works. I asked Anna if we could have a few more pieces for the show, and within 10 hours, she had non-stop worked and created a few more pieces. So sometimes we do have that type of exhilaration when we're working, the way that we're looking at things. But how would you say that, because one of the most difficult things I think is to really develop your signature and your handprint as a designer. So how did that part really come about for you? Was it from looking at the other work that other people were doing and remaking the vintage, or was it something about the pieces that you were already choosing for your shop?
I think you're not going to believe it, but I love going to B&Q. That's my inspiration. I actually go to B&Q, look at the little screws, look at the little metal pieces, and then I'm like, that's my new jumpsuit. And it's just a piece of metal, and I'm like, that's how it's going to be cut. And then, you could see my local B&Q, they know me so well. I sometimes build things there in the middle, so I would take a piping and other things, and they would be like, what you doing? I'm like, my new jumpsuit. And they were just like, oh, okay, right, that's okay. That's how it goes. Okay. It's basically the kind of industrial pieces which I then transform into clothing.
Which is quite fascinating from having inspiration from industrial pieces to sort of going for, I'm going to make vegan and sustainable fashion.
Yeah.
So how did that meld for you? How did that world come together?
I mean, I've been a vegan all my life. I mean, almost since I was 10 years old. So,
and was that something you chose?
yes, I watched some documentary about vivisection, and after that, I was like, nope, I'm not gonna eat anything with a heartbeat. So, that was a very conscious decision that I don't want to do anything. I want to do everything which is like cruelty-free. So it's extremely important for me for all the clothing to be like cruelty-free, no animal harm, nothing like that. So strictly vegan-friendly in any way possible. Yeah.
And so that was something that led into you working sort of in vintage fashion, then creating your own designs. And then where did that take you? What was the next big thing that happened to you? Was that going to Helsinki?
Helsinki Fashion Week would be my first fashion show, which I've done. And I think that was the major thing. After that, I went to do collaboration with Ferragamo, which was
And that was
amazing.
quite extraordinary.
Yeah, that was huge. They produced a little book, I think a year later, and I had it in my home, and I opened it. I looked at my photo, and I was like, oh, God. I closed it, and I never read anything what was inside yet. So it's like imposter syndrome. Like, that was amazing. I went in for Ferragamo, but, like, yeah.
Yeah, no, that was quite
on the
extraordinary. You know, there are over 20,000 applicants for the
Yeah.
Ferragamo exhibition, and that's an extraordinary thing that happened, and to be sought after by Sarah Maino for
Yeah,
that.
that was thanks to Sarah Maimo, definitely. Definitely, that was her doing.
I was sort of thinking about, and going from that, because so many of us have traditional design backgrounds where they're studying fashion, we come from a family of manufacturers, or we sort of know someone. So sometimes forging your own path in fashion is a whole other thing. And then finding that the values that you live and that the values in fashion come together. I was always told early in my career that what my values were and my fashion sensibility were two different things. But nowadays, and in a place like this, in a place like Source, we're showing that how all of those things can come together. So how for you have you incorporated that into your design work now?
I mean, I think that was extremely easy. I loved vintage as a person. I loved wearing vintage. Then I was like, okay, I can have my own brand, continuing kind of the style. Vegan-wise, vegan-friendly label because I'm a vegan, so come like a continuous thing. Yeah, very easy. And also I like unusual things, so yeah, that works.
And you've also worked with deadstock, scraps.
Yeah, that's actually, it's left over from, yeah, that's basically leftover like vegan yarn, so yeah, definitely.
Which is a great way to sort of incorporate things. And now what's the next step? You've just found your own studio.
Yes, I was lucky to get like an art studio last month, so that is working so far very well, so yeah.
So one of the things that you said to me, that when, as a designer, that when you get your own studio, it sort of forces you to now start producing and looking for those next steps. So I think that's one of the difficulties that so many young designers face, is we come out of school, we graduate, we have a collection, we want to make things, but we've been making them ourselves. So then you come to a place like this to find manufacturers. So what's sort of the next step of evolution for you as a designer?
Hopefully the fully functioning fashion brand. The studio gonna be open from like probably next month, so that's the next step. But I would say that's the most important thing, is actually to have place to where you can actually design, because many of young designers don't really have that privilege. So I think that's one of the most important thing, to actually have a space to design and to be there for like 12 hours a day and do whatever you want to do there. So yeah.
And you've been talking about making pieces like this that are more commercially viable.
Yes, definitely. So you know, like when you see those catwalk pieces, some of them are just for the catwalk because they're not commercial in any sense, but the commercial ones, so far, they were kind of quite popular as well. So.
But that was also a surprise that you said that a lot of like the pieces that you made in Helsinki and a lot of the sort of one-off sort of show pieces you found sold right away, unexpectedly.
I'm always extremely confused when this happens. So yes, but they do sell straight away. Yes.
Yeah, so from a customer point of view, it's really interesting to start thinking, what is the customer looking for? Are they sort of looking for these everyday pieces, or are they really looking to find something extraordinary, especially from a young designer, and especially the people who are buying sustainability, what are they really looking for? And what do you think your customer would like?
But that's the thing. Sometimes, you design something and you think like, okay, I like that, but who the heck gonna wear that? Like, there probably not a lot of people who gonna wear that. And then you find out that it's your most sellable piece, and you're like, really? So you cannot predict who's gonna wear your clothing. I've got all this data who is buying my clothing, and they all so different. You cannot actually have a one typical type who buys my things.
And did you want to talk a little bit about the fabrications that you're using?
Yes, so like the ready-to-wear stuff, I'm trying to make sure that it's all certified cotton or organic cotton, or it's a linen blend, or viscose, everything what is like natural. We have some man-made fabric used in couture pieces, but then the couture pieces meant to be like one-off pieces which you treasure for years. And it's also made mostly from the deadstock fabric. So in that way, it is planet-friendly, because it's not thrown away kind of piece. So hopefully, even if this is not a cotton, it still makes sense to use it.
And you were working with a lot of deadstock before. Are you now trying to find sort of other fabrics to work with?
Yeah, I actually found a lot of fabric producer here today. So yeah.
So that might inspire your next collection.
Definitely, it's a great place to actually source that.
Because I think those are the other things that young designers face, is being able to buy the right quantities, or working with manufacturers and having limits on, or really large quantities to buy.
Actually, I spoke with a few traders today, and you could have as low as 30 pieces per style. So I think for any starting designer, that's very doable, 30 pieces per style. So you don't have to have like 200 pieces to start with and think how I'm gonna actually pay for it. So I think it's great.
So in your short journey as a designer, like, what's been the most challenging part for you?
Not having a studio, definitely, I would say. No, I think, yeah, that would be the most challenging.
And what's been unexpected for you in your career so far?
Oh, gosh, probably Ferragamo. Probably that one.
Because that was an interesting story, how that came about.
Yes, definitely. I had a call from Sarah Maimo, and I thought that actually that wasn't Sarah Maimo. And they asked me to apply, and they say, we have this competition, and would you like to apply? And I said, how many people applied? And they said 20,000. I'm like, I will pass, but thank you. Because I thought there's no chance I would be considered. And they picked, I think, 11 of us. I was like, oh, God, yeah. Okay, that's good. So it could happen. If you don't apply, you never know. So, it's possible.
That's kind of it. And I think so many people, not within fashion, within most of our jobs that we do, we always have that sort of imposter syndrome. Even if you've got somebody telling you, oh no, I really love what you do, I really believe in you, so we're kind of like, oh no, it's okay.
I mean, you're always going to have imposter syndrome. I mean, I think, when I won the Ferragamo thing, I was so broke that I couldn't afford the ticket to see my own exhibition. So I could either be on like an ego trip, like I'm so great, I'm amazing, but I wanted to be on the trip to Florence to see, my own designs, which I couldn't afford. So it was kind of like a ridiculous situation. So I think if you are there for like, recognition and as an ego trip, then you're gonna be very hurt down the line. It's a very hard business. You have to be focused. You have to create every day. And you have to improve yourself. You have to constantly be innovative and think about something bigger. And I think, I don't know who said that you are as good as your last collection. So, there's always a place to improve, definitely.
So how do you do that?
God, you just practice. You close yourself in the studio and you just practice every time.
So one of the things you mentioned before, that you're trying to be quite disciplined now about getting to the studio quite early and start working.
Yeah, I start at 7 o'clock. I mean, I wake up at 5, start at 7. I read for like an hour, drink coffee for like an hour, and I work for 12 every day, including Sunday, because I'm obsessed.
And do you work by draping on mannequins? Do you work by sketching? Like, where does that? I know we know the B&Q inspiration, but where does that sort of inspiration come from? Or what's your process?
I always sketch, and the final product never looks like a sketch. Like, there's no chance it will look even similar, but you sketch some idea how something gonna look like, yes, definitely.
So how did you go then from law to going, I'm going to have a vintage shop at Alfie's?
Interesting.
It's quite a big jump. Or it looks like a big jump from the outside.
I think I like to be free. I don't think law can give you that. So I like to be more creative and kind of free spirit and do what I want to do. And I definitely couldn't do that as a lawyer. So I thought, why not? And the vintage, of course, obsession. I had a shop called Velvet Atelier for 7 years, and I had pre-1950s collection. So I was obsessed, absolutely obsessed with every single piece. I would treasure it. I would frame it in my house on the wall, like 1920s flapper dress, because that's how obsessed I was. So, yeah.
So was that something you sort of just deep dived sort of into the history of fashion? Was it just an interest that really developed?
We had antiques at home, so I think that was kind of like a bit of that. But I like Art Deco. I always like Art Deco. I like shapes, and that was that.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
I don't know if anyone has any questions for Anna or anything that they'd like to discuss. Yes.
So you said that you take vintage pieces and you rework the vintage pieces to be modern. Where do you take your modern inspiration from?
I mean, oh gosh. Again, that would be based on the original vintage piece and kind of like rework to something I think it's current. I might be obviously wrong, but something I think it's current. Most of the time with vintage pieces, I actually try to preserve the vintage piece so it looks as much as vintage as possible, and instead of making it into something totally new. Because if that piece was around for so many years, I really would like this to stay around for so many years. So it's more like preservation and kind of restoring instead of like, I don't know, putting patches in the places when they shouldn't be, if this makes sense. Yeah,
a little bit, but at the same time, you were making them your own style. So I think that's part of the question. How did you make them your own?
Hard to say, again. It's just like momentary thing, whatever comes to your mind. But again, that would be anything which is industrial. I'm always inspired by, in a very weird way.
Okay, great. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
You said you're a lawyer and a fashion designer.
Yes.
Is it that,
we can't hear.
Okay. You said you're a lawyer and a fashion designer. Is it that you want to be the two, or what happened? How did you get to be a lawyer and a fashion designer at the same time, or you just wanted to be on the side? I don't know.
I mean, I want to do only fashion, if this makes sense. But I think having a law background helps you to kind of be very strict with your ethics, with how you work, how you become like more sustainable. So like I would search where this fabric comes from, like crazy. I would check every single manufacturer. Like I would do like some sort of like checking for a client. I would do exactly the same with a fashion, make sure that everything is like legal, if this makes sense, but like that there are no dodgy practices. No one is like even the factor is that no one is actually. I can give you an example. Like I'm highly against free internship. That's one of the things which is very popular in fashion, which I disagree with, because I understand that people learn from you. I could have many interns at my place, but I would never have them being there totally for free because I think it's not ethical, and that's what is happening in fashion in general. So that would be definitely something which, again, I would advocate for, like fair wages in my place as well. And I don't think it could be sustainable and ethical and then have people, in your studio working for free 12 hours a day as interns. I just disagree with that hugely. I can't have it. I mean, even if it costs me a lot, I can't have it on principle. So yeah, I think.
Yeah, it's important to be able to live your values. We talk about it, but sometimes we want to squeeze here and there, and sometimes you just have to sort of go, no.
Yeah, of course. No, of course, because otherwise there's like, if I let something go on the then I cannot really like wake up next morning and think like I'm the sustainable designer. I just no.
So what does that mean to you to be a sustainable designer? How do you define sustainability?
The fair practices, definitely, that everyone is paid fairly. I would definitely need to improve my working hours. That's crazy. But make sure that everything is done in a fair way. That's definitely. And that we progress and we innovate and we, like the speaker before me, that we maybe start to think about how we could be even more ethical, how we could be more sustainable. I really want to visit some, the laboratories when then they, when you can actually see some of the fabrics, the bacteria kind of, how you say those bacteria? Those fabrics made by cultivating bacteria. I want to really see that. So yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's so interesting, the things that are changing, and I think that's the idea that sustainability, it is growing and it is changing. So there's a lot happening.
Of course, and we have to progress. I don't think fashion is in the greatest state at the moment. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And if you haven't seen the Catwalk show, she's our headline designer. So please come and take a look. And thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Anna.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.